Howdy folks, this is Father Dougal 9000 here, and welcome to another episode of Dougal's Game Finish Chronicles, a series where I talk about the games I've played and beaten, as part of the Hardcore Gaming 101 Forums Game Finish Challenge. So this episode, is actually the 20th episode of the series. That's wild to think about. Is this going to be celebrated in any particular way? No, not really. I just thought it'd be really nice to point that out, just mention it and go, "Wahey!" So, wahey! Today's games were originally logged from the 17th to the 20th of May 2021. Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, Spirited Justice, for the Nintendo 3DS. The Ace Attorney series. This was one of my favorite game series during the early 2010s. It was the first DS game I properly got into after getting a 3DS, and it taught me to see how the handheld could do things with genres I previously hadn't known or experienced. It was a series that influenced my interest in writing dialogue and prose for a good few years, and it's a series where I'd played most of the main games. However, I hadn't played much of Spirited Justice, the sixth and most recent main game, aside from an aborted attempt back in 2018. Finally getting around to playing it properly and beating it was one of my more personal goals in doing this game finish challenge, and after a few weeks, well, I've managed to do it. It's here after all. I don't know, to be honest, I'm actually fairly ambivalent towards this one, and have been more or less from the start. It's not because it's a bad game or one full of problems. As far as Ace Attorney games go, it's a pretty competently made one. There's a lot of complex mysteries, there's decent optional conversations and asides when you examine objects and whatnot. And I got pretty invested into it as things developed, particularly anything to do with the Apollo Justice characters, because I'm deeply, deeply fond of that game. It's also surprisingly ambitious, both in terms of its gameplay, bringing back the various character-specific gimmicks like Psyche Locks and Perceive while introducing the new Seance Insights, and what it's thematically trying to tackle. It's pretty admirable, all things considered, though it also results in a game that I found much longer and wordier than any of the previous games. Most Ace Attorney games I found tended to be around 10 to 20 hours, but Spirited Justice blows them out of the water in that regard. It took me nearly 33 hours to beat, and I was trying not to drag on that. Honestly, it's something that I don't think is a positive, it being that long. It drags the narrative side way down with flashbacks that are frequent enough to annoy, or text boxes full to the brim with ellipses. And the game itself is just slower. There's a lot more graphically intense sections, so the frame rate goes down quite a bit more. Loading takes a bit longer when you're either reloading saves or loading up new sections. It seems to be crumbling under the weight of all that ambition, and it makes for a game that I don't feel I ever really want to revisit. And at the time I was looking into the great Ace Attorney spin-offs that had just come out in the West. Going by what their pages say, I see that their average playtime is also around 25 to 30 hours. Okay, considering I got into the whole Ace Attorney thing way back in 2012, and I haven't properly touched one of these things since 2017 or thereabouts, I do half wonder if that length isn't inherently a problem with Spirited Justice, and more that the series isn't for me anymore, in terms of length anyway. Maybe I'd have no problem with playing games of that length had I done so back in my teens, or maybe I'd be fine with it now if I didn't have game length on my mind more than usual. Possibly because of this challenge, but also just some other stuff that was going on at the time. It's not a bad thing necessarily, it was just something I was mulling over, and still, even 2 years later, kind of impacts my impression of the game quite a bit. Still, I'm happy to have finally played Spirited Justice properly, and I ended up liking it way more than I thought I would, so there's always that. No matter how I feel about the series going forward, at least I have that. I've played all the main games until if they announce Ace Attorney 7. God, the past and present tense thing is going on again. Oh dear. The Flower Collectors for the Nintendo Switch. Thank God for demos, because this is a game I would not have checked out if it didn't have a demo, and it's quite a cool little game at that. It's a first-person adventure game by Austrian developer Mipumi Games? I don't know what the apostrophes between each syllable are meant to mean. But it is an adventure game, and you play as a retired police officer named Jorge, who sits in his apartment, bound to his wheelchair, and observes the various people outside. It takes a turn for the mysterious when a man is found dead in the plaza, and a girl named Melinda barges into your apartment, asking for help to figure out what happened. The gameplay largely consists of watching people, taking notes, and guiding Melinda to places where she can talk to people or find more clues. It's fairly simple, but it's quite the compelling game. The fact that it's rooted in real-life history is what makes it especially interesting, being set in late 70s Spain following the death of Francisco Franco. As the characters try to fight back against the fascist forces ruling the country for nearly 40 years, and observing how those forces affect the people around Jorge, there's a lot to mull over. My only complaint is that you can only save in between chapters, some of which go on for around half an hour. Considering it's on the Switch and can be played on the go, having to wait until you finish the chapter before you can save and actually stop playing can get pretty annoying, but otherwise it's a cool game, definitely worth checking out if you're into adventure games, or you want to learn a bit more about history. Or heck, if you just want something that's got funny animal people in it. Ridge Racer Type 4 for the PlayStation. I've always wanted to check out Ridge Racer, but particularly this one, because I really liked the look of its visuals whenever it popped up in YouTube videos, and I finally went through with it since, hey, it's on the PlayStation Classic, I might as well. I've only played this and the DS version of Ridge Racer 64, but I'm liking what I've played. I will say the drifting did throw me off at first enormously with how kind of automated it feels. Depending on how you turn into corners, it can suddenly feel like you've been placed onto an invisible track where you're swerving around madly until you're suddenly not. There is an art to learning it, but I kind of preferred the drift to be a bit more useful like in Outrun 2, so in this case I didn't do a whole lot of drifting. Playing the game on easy meant that I wasn't encouraged to really learn the drifting. I could just take in the vibes, enjoy some solid racing, cool levels with gorgeous color schemes, and oh man, what a glorious soundtrack it has going for it. I play through the Grand Prix mode, and while it's something I'm never going to do, I really like how there's loads of different dialogue exchanges and car unlocks depending on not just the difficulty of the game, all of which have unique crews depending on what difficulty you play it at, but also whatever position you come in changes what you unlock, what people say to you afterwards. It means there's a lot of reasons to keep replaying the Grand Prix mode when, there isn't terribly much game, and the stylish presentation of the cutscenes is very, very cool. Hell of a neat little single-player campaign to keep things interesting. Maybe I'll pop back in every now and again for a different car or team to converse with, but I'm happy to leave it at that for the time being. Hell yeah, Ridge Racer Type 4. And with that, we've wrapped up the 20th episode of the series. Well, hey again. I hope that you enjoyed watching and all of the previous episodes and whatever I end up doing in the future. And, obviously that you'll tune in for the very next video. Thank you so much, and until we meet again, have a wonderful day.